Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we would be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 12th July 2018. Now, let us begin. Now, we have taken this article from page 9. Now, what this article talks about is that the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act of 1985, or what is popularly known as the NDPS Act, requires to be changed to become more effective. Now the main objective of the NDPS Act. Now the main objective of the Narcotic Drugs Psychotropic Substances Act of 1985 is to deter drug trafficking by prosecuting drug possession. And this act prosecutes drug possession by enforcing strict liability offences, mandatory minimum prison sentences, enforcing death penalty among other forms of prosecuting punishment. Now under the NDPS Act, the death penalty was introduced in 1989. And this death penalty was introduced in the Act to deter narco-terrorism. Now narco-terrorism is terrorism activities that have been financed by the illegal drug trafficking. Now if you consider the example of Afghanistan, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda used the production of opium in Afghanistan to finance their terrorist activities. So now hopefully up till here you have understood the objective of the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act of 1985, wherein the main intent of this act is to deter drug trafficking by prosecuting drug possession. And it prosecutes drug possession by enforcing strict liability offences, mandatory minimum prison sentences, and even in rare cases the death penalty. And this death penalty was introduced in the act in 1989 so as to deter narco-terrorism, wherein at that time illegal drug trafficking was used to finance terrorist activities. And you can consider the example of Afghanistan itself, wherein the Taliban and Al-Qaeda used the production of opium in Afghanistan to finance their terrorist activities. Now the author in this article has criticized the results that have been achieved from the NDPS Act, wherein according to the author there is high rate of conviction and imprisonment under the NDPS Act, wherein roughly 42% of all the prisoners in Punjab are in jail for offences related to this law. And according to the author, this high rate of conviction and imprisonment, especially in Punjab, has not stopped or even decreased the drug menace in Punjab. The second point raised by the author is that the NDPS Act overlooks intent and therefore does not differentiate between who is a drug trafficker, who is a drug peddler, who is a drug user. And according to the author, because this act overlooks intent and does not differentiate between drug traffickers or its users, the act has not been able to be used effectively in curbing drug trafficking. Now the third result highlighted by the author is that criminalizing possession of drug by a user further criminalizes addiction, and because of which it creates hurdle for the drug user to avail treatment. So now hopefully up till here you've also understood the results that have been highlighted by the author of the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act of 1985, wherein under the NDPS Act there has been a high rate of conviction and imprisonment, wherein 42% of all the prisoners in Punjab are for offences related to this law. But however, according to the author, this high rate of conviction and imprisonment under this act has not either decreased or halted the drug menace in Punjab. Moreover, according to the author, the NDPS Act overlooks intent, which means that the NDPS Act does not differentiate between drug traffickers, drug users, drug peddlers, or drug mules. And because the NDPS Act does not differentiate between drug traffickers and drug users, it has not been effectively able to achieve its objective of deterring drug trafficking. And lastly, according to the author, the criminalization of the possession of drugs by drug users further criminalizes addiction, wherein according to the author, drug addiction is a health issue and not a criminal offense. And because drug possession by drug users has been criminalized, it therefore creates problems for the drug users or its family members in availing proper treatment. Now with regards to this, the author has also given suggestions for improvement. Now the suggestion given by the author is that the prosecution of drug-related offences should be on a differential basis. And according to the author, this prosecution of drug-related offences should be on the basis of intent, wherein the intent for prosecution should be more effectively focused upon drug trafficking. So now hopefully up till here you also understood the suggestion given by the author on how the NTPS Act can be improved. When according to the author, under the NTPS Act, the government should prosecute drug offences on a differential basis. And this prosecution on differential basis should be on the intent of drug trafficking. So now hopefully up till here you understood the objective of the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act of 1985. Moreover, you also understand the results of the NTPS Act, more in specifically with relation to Punjab. And lastly, you also understand the suggestion given by the author for the improvement of the NTPS Act. Now let us understand as to where this article and this explanation would be placed in your UPSC syllabus. Now this article and the explanation given in this section would first be placed in GS paper 2 within the section Social Justice, and more specifically issues relating to development and management of health, wherein the particular section in health that it would focus upon is drug addiction. Well, similarly, it would also be placed in GS paper 3 within the section Security, and more specifically the linkages of organized crime such as drug trafficking with terrorism. And you can use this article and the explanation given in this section to a certain extent in both of these fields. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 9. Now what this article talks about is that the government of Karnataka has recently drafted a private conservancy rules. And the objective of this private conservancy rule is to increase the forest area of Karnataka through private land. Now what you need to understand is how the Karnataka government is increasing the forest area through private land. Now under this private conservancy rule, anyone with a minimum of 100 acres of land, which is bordering a national park in Karnataka, can convert their private land into a wildlife private conservancy. And this wildlife private conservancy can have 5% of its land to be used for ecotourism. And within this 5% land, the private owner can build commercial buildings. Now this wildlife private conservancy under the private conservancy rules of Karnataka government is based on a similar model from South Africa. However, the rules and regulations under the Indian model is very different from the South African model. Now hopefully up till here you have understood that the Karnataka government has drafted a private conservancy rules to increase its forest area, and it intends to increase this forest area through the use of private land, wherein anyone with 100 acres of land which is bordering a national park in Karnataka can convert their private land to a wildlife private conservancy. And this wildlife private conservancy can have 5% of its land that can be used for ecotourism, and therefore the private owner under this 5% land can form commercial buildings. And this model of wildlife private conservancy under the private conservancy rules of Karnataka is based on the similar format of the South African model. But however, the Indian rules and regulations are very different from the South African model. Now the author has raised various concerns with regards to this policy. Now the first concern raised by the author, wherein the use of such private land may bring changes to the natural behavior of wildlife. The second concern raised by the author is that this private ownership may lead to illegal activities such as poaching. Now hopefully up till here you've also understood the two concerns that have been raised by the author with regards to the private conservancy rules of Karnataka government, wherein according to the author, the usage of such 100 acres of private land may bring about changes to the natural behavior of wildlife. And the second concern raised by the author is that the private ownership of such land may also lead to illegal activities such as poaching. However, you have to understand that this news is currently in transition, and we'll have to wait and see on how these private conservancy rules move forward and what might be the impact on wildlife. And because this news is in transition, let us wait and see on how it moves forward. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 9. Now what this article talks about is the Nipah virus, and the reason it is in the news is because the government of Kerala has declared that Kozhikode and Malappuram, which are in Kerala, are now free from the Nipah virus. Now this Nipah virus has already been covered in the June edition of the Focus magazine. So what we'll do with regards to this article is understand about the Nipah virus with the help of the Focus magazine, and then simultaneously understand the facts that have been stated in this article. Now let us first understand on how the Nipah virus is spread. Now the spread of the Nipah virus is a form of a zoonotic spillover, wherein a zoonotic spillover means the transmission of a pathogen from a vertebrate animal such as bats to humans, and the Nipah virus is a form of a zoonotic spillover. Now, the Nipah infection cycle has been seen in three different phases, wherein in the first phase, the bats urinate in the palm saps that have been formed by farmers or villagers, and when people consume the contaminated date palm sap, they might be infected with the Nipah virus. The second infection cycle, wherein the Nipah virus has a spillover from bats to horses or other forms of animal, and these animals are then consumed by humans who then get affected. And the third Nipah infection cycle is when pigs are exposed to the droppings by bats, who then get infected and further infect the human who is in close contact with them. Now, the Nipah virus was first recognized in Malaysia, and the people who got infected with the Nipah virus in Malaysia were generally pig farmers. And after that, the Nipah virus was again seen in Bangladesh, in which the people who were infected with the Nipah virus in Bangladesh had drunk the contaminated palm sap, in which the bats had urinated in. So now hopefully up till here you've understood the infection cycle of the Nipah virus. Now according to the article, even though the districts of Kozhikode and Malappuram in Kerala have been declared Nipah free, but the Nipah virus continues to circulate in regions of India, and that the government of India should be on guard against any other future outbreak of the Nipah virus. Now the understanding of the Nipah infection cycle and the zoonotic spillover becomes relevant with regards to your prelims examination within the section General Science, wherein previously questions have been asked in your prelims examination, wherein the first question on the Zika virus was asked in the prelims of 2017, while the second question on the Ebola virus was asked in the prelims of 2015, wherein the first question had asked the features of the Zika virus, while the second question had asked as to where the Ebola virus has been seen. And in similar terms, a question for your practice is consider the following statements on the Nipah virus, wherein the first statement states that the Nipah virus is a rare event of the zoonotic spillover, while the second statement states that it has been seen in Malaysia, Bangladesh, and India. Now you already know that the Nipah virus is a rare event of a zoonotic spillover, and therefore the first statement is correct, while the Nipah virus has been seen in Malaysia and in Bangladesh and in India, and therefore the correct answer would be C, both 1 and 2. So now hopefully in this explanation you have understood the infection cycle of the Nipah virus. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 3. Now what this article talks about is the Trafficking of Persons Prevention, Protection and Rehabilitation Bill of 2018. And the reason this bill is in the news is because survivors of human trafficking have written to the 10 women MPs and have urged them to support and pass the Trafficking of Persons Bill of 2018. So what we'll do with regards to this article is understand about the Trafficking of Persons Bill of 2018. Now the first feature of this bill is that it seeks to cover aggravated forms of trafficking. And this aggravated forms of trafficking would include trafficking for the purpose of forced labor, begging, marriage, or for early sexual maturity, apart from other forms of trafficking. Now this Trafficking of Persons Bill of 2018 seeks to provide a time-bound trial, and this time-bound trial would be within a period of 1 year. And apart from this, it also seeks to provide special courts in each district for speedy trial. The third main feature of this bill is that it seeks to create a rehabilitation fund. And this rehabilitation fund will be used for the physical, psychological, and social well-being of the victim. And under this rehabilitation fund, the victim would be provided with education, skill development, healthcare, psychological support, legal aid, safe accommodation, among other forms of physical, psychological, and social protection. Now, the fourth main feature of this bill is that the National Investigation Agency, or NIA, will perform the task of the Anti-Trafficking Bureau. Apart from having the National Investigation Agency, or NIA, at the national level, there would also be dedicated institutional mechanisms at the district and the state level. And apart from this, the National Anti-Trafficking Bureau will also address the issues of international or transnational trafficking. Wherein to combat transnational trafficking, the National Anti-Trafficking Bureau will have international coordination with authorities in foreign countries and international organizations. And the seventh and the last main feature of the Trafficking of Persons Bill of 2018 is that it seeks to provide heavy penalty and punishment for traffickers. Now hopefully up till here you understood the main features of the Trafficking of Persons Prevention, Protection and Rehabilitation Bill of 2018. wherein the first main feature is that it seeks to cover the aggravated forms of trafficking, wherein this bill covers trafficking for the purpose of forced labor, begging, marriage, or early sexual maturity. The second main feature of this bill is that it seeks to provide time bound trial, and this time bound trial would be within a period of 1 year. And apart from this, special courts in each district would be set up to ensure a speedy trial. The third main feature of the bill is that it seeks to create a rehabilitation fund, and this rehabilitation fund would be used for the physical, psychological, and social well being of the victim, wherein this rehabilitation fund would provide the education, skill development, healthcare, psychological support, legal aid, safe accommodation, and apart from other physical, psychological, and social support for the victim. The fourth main feature of this bill is that the National Investigation Agency, or NIA, will perform the tasks of the Anti Trafficking Bureau at the national level. And apart from this, there would also be a dedicated institutional mechanism at the district and the state level, apart from having the National Investigative Agency at the national level. The sixth main feature of this bill is that it seeks to create a National Anti Trafficking Bureau, which would also address transnational trafficking, wherein this National Anti Trafficking Bureau would coordinate with foreign authorities and international organizations to combat trafficking. And the seventh and the last main feature of this bill is that it would impose a heavy penalty and punishment for traffickers. Now, hopefully, you have understood the main features of the Trafficking of Persons Bill of 2018. Now, this Trafficking of Persons Bill of 2018 would be placed in GS Paper 2 within the section Social Justice and within the subsection Mechanisms, Laws, Institutions and Bodies constituted for the protection and betterment of vulnerable section, wherein the vulnerable section within this would be victims of trafficking. Now, a question for your practice. Human trafficking is a pervasive yet invisible crime affecting the most vulnerable sections of society, especially women and children. Suggest steps required to be taken to combat human trafficking. Now, considering the fact that the Trafficking of Persons Prevention, Protection and Rehabilitation Bill of 2018 is still currently in transition, you can highlight these 7 steps that can be taken to combat human trafficking. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 8. Now what this article talks about is that biogas and piped natural gas or PNG should be provided weightage as an option of fuel choices in India, especially within the rural areas of India. Now currently the fuel options that are available in India are firewood, pellets, biogas, kerosene, LPG and the piped natural gas. And according to the authors, biogas and PNG should be provided weightage as an option in fuel choices, especially in rural India, is because biogas and then PNG are better than other fuels in terms of cost effectiveness. They also produce less greenhouse gases and also create less in-house air pollution. Wherein if you see in this graph as provided within the article, biogas has one of the least cost and also produces one of the least emission. However, the use of biogas and piped natural gas or PNG has seen several hurdles in India, wherein the first hurdle is that the government policies such as providing subsidies to LPG, the emphasis on LPG connections through the Ujjwala Yojana, among other government policies, has led to a preference for LPG as a fuel option, especially in rural India. And this has caused biogas and PNG to lose out on promotional value as being effective fuel choices in India. Apart from this, the biogas plants and the infrastructure for piped natural gas suffer from lack of maintenance in India, follow-up services, while biogas plants especially suffer from policy paralysis. And apart from this, both biogas plants and PNG infrastructure also suffer from implementation bottlenecks. Now, the authors have highlighted various suggestions for the promotion of biogas and PNG, wherein the government should provide financial support and facilitate capacity building for biogas plants and PNG infrastructure. And this can be done on the basis of a services based enterprise model. While in similar terms, the PNG infrastructure can be promoted in urban areas, apart from having the cost of PNG for consumers at a competitive value to LPG, so as to ensure that there is a level playing field between piped natural gas and LPG, as being an equal option for fuel choices. Now, with regards to UPSC syllabus, this article and the explanation given in this section would be placed in GS Paper 3 within the section Economic Development and within the subsection infrastructure, and more specifically energy. So now hopefully you have understood the hurdles that are there in the promotion of biogas and piped natural gas or PNG as being fuel options in India, and what are the suggestions by the author for the improvement in this condition. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now I've taken this article from page 18. Now what this article talks about is that the Niligiri Tahr can lose approximately 60% of its habitat due to climate change. Now what we'll do with regards to this article is understand about the Niligiri Tahr from the perspective of your prelims examination. Now Niligiri Tahr is also known as Niligiri Ibex and is endemic to the Nilgiri Hills. Now, this Niligiri Tahr is generally found in the high altitudes of India's western Ghats, particularly in the states of Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Now, the Niligiri Tahr is also listed in IUCN's Red List, and it has been listed as endangered. Apart from this, the Niligiri Tahr is also protected under the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Now, hopefully, up till here, you've understood that the Niligiri Tahr is also known as Nilgiri ibex and is endemic to the Nilgiri Hills, wherein endemic means that it is native and is restricted to that particular place. And apart from this, the Nilgiri Tahr is also found in the high altitudes of the Western Ghats, in particular within the southern section of the Western Ghats in the states of Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Apart from this, the Nilgiri Tahr is also listed in the IUCN's Red List as being endangered. And lastly, the Nilgiri Tahr is also protected under the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Now let us understand the major threats to the Nilgiri Tahr, wherein the first threat is due to habitat loss due to habitat fragmentation. The second major threat is poaching and illegal hunting. The third reason causing the endangerment of Nilgiri Tahr is the grazing competition from domestic livestock. And the fourth and the last major reason for the endangerment of the Nilgiri Tahr is that the invasive plants have been replacing the native grass. Now hopefully up till here you also understood the four major threats that have caused the endangerment to Nilgiri Tahr, wherein the first reason is habitat loss due to land fragmentation. The second major reason is of poaching and illegal hunting. The third major reason is the grazing competition from the domestic livestock. And the fourth and the final major threat that has caused the endangerment of the Nilgiri Tahr is that the invasive plants have been replacing the native grass, which is the major food source that the Nilgiri Tahr prefers. Now the reason these facts about Nilgiri Tahr are important to know because previously questions have been asked in the prelims examination. When this question was asked in the prelims of 2017, when this question had asked as to what would be the best place to see gharials in their natural habitat. And within that context, you understand that the best place to see the Nilgiri ibex is in the Western Ghats, especially within the southern portion of the Western Ghats in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Wherein this question had asked if a species of tortoise is declared protected under Schedule 1 under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, what does it imply? And within that context, you understand that the Nilgiri Tahr is also protected under Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act, and thereby it enjoys the same level of protection as the tiger. Where in similar terms, the native location of the Great Indian Hornbill has also been asked in the year of 2016. While a question was asked in the prelims of 2015 with reference to dugong, with regards to its type, its location, and whether it is provided legal protection under Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. And in addition, there are more questions that have been asked on specific animals in the prelims examination. But hopefully you understand the basic features of the Nilgiri Tahr. And now with this, we come to an end in the analysis of today's newspaper. Now we move on to the question for today.